Welcome to this edition of the 700 Club. We've got a tax guy with us to tell you how you can save money and beat the IRS. He's going to tell you some secrets the IRS does not want you to know. But before we get to that, you see the man that's on the hot seat. He's the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer. And he says President Trump intends to keep his campaign promises on religious freedom, including repealing what's called the Johnson Amendment.
Spicer also says that despite last week's setback, Republicans in Congress have not given up on their efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. Jenna Browder brings us the story from Washington.
Health care could be back on the table. House Republicans are considering another vote, possibly as soon as next week, after the American Health Care Act failed on the House floor last week. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer explained on Brody and Browder, CBN's Facebook Live political show.
After sort of talks broke down last Friday, I think a lot of folks started to call the president and the senior team here with ideas and suggestions how to get things back on track. There's a lot of willingness to get this thing done.
Spicer adding many GOP lawmakers were elected on the promise of repealing and replacing Obamacare.
And I think, David, after they went home for the weekend, spent a little time with their constituents, they've come back eager to come back to the table and to try to get a deal on this.
Another issue we asked him about was religious liberty and when the president might make good on some campaign promises. Many evangelicals want to see him sign a religious liberty executive order that would allow them to practice their faith, including in the workplace, without fear of retribution. They also remember the promise he made on the campaign trail to repeal the Johnson Amendment, which keeps churches from speaking out politically.
And it's something that I think you're going to continue to see action on here in the White House. We've been very busy with a lot of other things, but rest assured that the president's commitment to religious liberty, and particularly the Johnson Amendment, is alive and well.
So what's it like being the White House press secretary? We ask him about all of the attention he gets being in the spotlight. You are one of the most recognizable faces now in the country. We're wondering, when you go out in public, do you fly under the radar, or do people have some choice words for you?
I would say this. Probably 99% of the people who approach me have very positive things. I think one of the nicest and most kindest things that you can ever hear is when someone tells you they're praying for you. That really is the most that somebody could ever give another individual, is to tell them that they are thinking of them, that they are praying to God, that you succeed, that this country succeeds, that this president succeeds. And I get a lot of that, and that's probably the most reassuring part of the job. But once in a while, there's clearly a couple bad apples that I try to pray for, because I recognize that not everyone everyone has a right to express themselves under our Constitution, and we welcome that and we cherish that. But at times, it may not be the most appropriate venue to do that.
Sean, how's it going for you? I know you're a dedicated Catholic. Has this job tested your faith a little bit? I mean, it's been a roller coaster, or it can be, that job, no matter what's going on. Well,
number one, we're still in the season of Lent, and this is a great time, between almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. It's a reminder during these 40 days of a recommitment to a higher calling. But again, I think one of the things that it does is it strengthens your faith. It's one place that you, despite all of the negative tweets and the comments that Jenna was talking about or alluding to, that I think there's the one place that you can look to gain strength and confidence and wisdom and guidance.
And there's no doubt he's going to have to continue to lean on his faith as the spokesman for a White House with an aggressive agenda that includes tax reform, rebuilding America's infrastructure, and depending on what could happen next week, possibly health care. Reporting in Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Very interesting, tremendous. Well, it's something you can pray about. He wants people to pray for him. Do it. Well, in other news, President Trump is also taking on a deadly epidemic that's been sweeping the country. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, the president is placing the spotlight on the drug addiction and the opioid epidemic. He's tapped New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to lead a commission that will look at the biggest drug overdose crisis in U.S. history. Heather Sells has that story.
The nation's opioid addiction is killing tens of thousands of people every year. The CDC estimates that 33,000 died because of an opioid overdose in 2015. It says 91 people in the U.S. die every day from such drugs. It's why the president is stepping up efforts to combat the crisis.
This is a total epidemic, and I think it's probably almost untalked about compared to the severity that we're witnessing.
On Wednesday, the president and commission head Chris Christie met with addiction advocates to hear their personal stories and policy proposals.
We talk about cancer, we talk about heart disease, we talk about diabetes, and we're not afraid to talk about it. But people are afraid and ashamed to talk about drug addiction. And while they don't talk about it, we lose lives.
Opioids are powerful, habit-forming narcotics. They go by names like Percocet and Oxycontin. Often, the addiction starts with prescription painkillers, and then people transition to heroin, which is cheaper. People like 21-year-old Caitlin Weems.
And then, unfortunately, later on in her story, someone said, why not try heroin? It's the same thing. And within 4 months, she died of a heroin overdose.
The president said the new group would work with local officials, law enforcement professionals, and addicts to improve treatment options, prevent people from getting hooked in the first place, and stop the flow of drugs across the border. But critics fear the president will not do enough. That's because the GOP health care bill, which recently stalled in Congress, would have ended Medicaid expansion, which provides substance abuse treatment. The president has yet to name his drug czar, someone to head the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy and oversee strategy and spending for the country. Heather Sells, CBN News.
13 people died in a tragic traffic accident that took place in southwest Texas yesterday after a head-on collision between a pickup truck and a church bus. The church members on the bus were coming back from a Baptist encampment where they were going to a Bible study. The 14 senior adults on the bus attended First Baptist Church of New Braunfels, Texas. Only 2 survived, a bus passenger and the truck driver. Both are in the hospital. The pastor of the church says they need prayer.
I'm very grateful for the outpouring. I've received messages from pastors in different parts of the state. We need a lot of prayer.
Pastor Brad McLean added that you never know what the day is going to bring. The Lord tells us that we have today. Tomorrow is not promised. Pat?
You know, I was talking to our producer about this whole thing. That pickup truck must have been traveling in excess of 100 miles an hour to make that kind of damage with that bus. And we don't know whether there was narcotics involved, whether there was alcohol involved. But we haven't gotten any of those stories. But clearly there was reckless driving, and that, as I say, there must have been 100 miles an hour or more to do that kind of damage. That thing becomes a 3,000-pound or 4,000-pound projectile going at an excessive rate of speed. And to plow into a church bus and do that kind of damage, it's a shocking, shocking, horrible thing. Very close to Uvalde, Texas. And our prayers and thoughts go out to these people, and I'm sure that all across the state of Texas, people are coming together to help those church members. Ephraim.
Pat, a federal judge in Hawaii has indefinitely extended his order to block President Trump's revised travel ban, just hours before it was set to take effect. Hawaii became the first state to file a lawsuit to stop the president's revised executive order on immigration earlier this month. The order bans new visas for people from 6 Muslim-majority countries. It also temporarily shuts down the U.S. refugee program. Hawaii claims the order is unconstitutional, but a Department of Justice attorney says Hawaii has not proved how it is harmed by this revised travel ban. Pat?
You know, I mentioned before, this is an absolute affront to our constitutional democracy. It's an outrage that one little federal judge would think that he has the power to overturn the ruling of the President of the United States and all of the necessary immigration laws have been passed by Congress. It is a usurpation. It is a judicial coup. It should not be allowed to stand. And I think the Trump Attorney General should appeal immediately. They should try to get it heard by one judge, one Supreme Court judge, and overturned immediately. This we cannot allow to stand. We cannot let one judge, and of course, what Trump could say and his team could say, look, you don't have the authority, you don't have the jurisdiction, and we're not going to abide by this order because it's unconstitutional. But somehow, somebody's got to stand up to these judges. I mean, this is outrageous. If any of the sitting district court judges around the nation could overturn the policy of the United States Congress or the United States President, it is an outrage. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time you stand up on this one. This is a judicial coup by a left-wing judge. It should not be allowed. Right-wing or left-wing judges should not have that kind of authority, and under the Constitution, they don't have. But it means they need an expedited appeal to the Supreme Court, and it may be heard by one judge alone, but it could be heard by one, and it could be taken up, but it needs to be expedited immediately.